Hello. So our speaker today is Laury Rappaport. Laury is currently an integrative psychotherapist and a guided imagery therapist at Sutter Institute for Health and Healing. She's also the founder and director of the Focusing and Expressive Arts Institute in Santa Rosa. She's the author and editor of Mindfulness and Arts Therapies, Theory and Practice, and the author of Focusing-Oriented Art Therapy, Accessing the Body's Wisdom and Creative Intelligence. And I think she also has some books and stuff available for sale today if you're interested in those topics. Laury's been training others internationally as well as nationally in focusing, mindfulness, and expressive arts therapy. She has expertise working with individuals, couples, families, and groups with a broad range of issues in a wide variety of settings, including day treatment, mental health clinics, and private practice. So welcome today, Laury.
Okay, I'd like to first of all thank Erica and REcamft and all, for inviting me, and all of you for coming here today. So, I was sitting there and I was looking at the title and I was like, wow. Tools for self-compassion, self-regulation, and accessing the body's wisdom, focusing and expressive arts in an hour and a half is what I was thinking. So I think we'll think of it as a taste today, but I hope it's a really good taste. I'm also getting used to the technology. I'm so used to pushing the computer, but Kelly is going to help me. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. So what I want you to just have a sense of what we're going to do today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and then actually teach you some things both about focusing and the expressive arts, and including the history of focusing, something about the focusing attitude. These are the main concepts, felt sense, focusing process that I'm going to go over with you, and something about the expressive arts. And then with both focusing and the expressive arts, it's really hard to fully get it unless you do a little bit of practice. So I'm going to intersperse some little bit of practice into the presentation. And what I like to say about practice is, people are in different places, and sometimes it feels, yes, I really want to do something a little bit experiential. And then sometimes you're sitting with a lot of stuff that you feel like, you know what, I actually don't want to kind of touch anything in there. So I like to make it a safe place for you to sense into yourself and figure out what's right, because learning happens in all kinds of ways. It happens, some people like the experience, and other people love to listen and to be present. So I think as long as we're all present in the way that feels right, that's what will work well. So I encourage you for that. Okay? And then I'll intersperse some clinical examples and go over the benefits of both focusing and the expressive arts. So like the 30 years, 40 years, I was thinking when you said how long you were an art therapist, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I have to count that. Let's see. I can tell you I got my bachelor's degree in 1975, so you can do the math. So it's a long time. And just briefly, through my own being a teenager, that adolescent angst, I found the use of art, that it kind of reached something inside that words didn't. It also reached something and gave me something of healing when I couldn't talk to anybody. And so there's a lot that the arts do to help capture experience that is beyond words or when you have anybody else to talk to. And you'll see the art itself can also be like a listening reflection, a mirror. And then briefly, I discovered focusing when I was in graduate school, and I was studying counseling and psychotherapy and the expressive arts. And when I learned focusing, which I actually first got introduced through a therapist who was doing something called focusing, which I had no idea. She would actually go like this. I'll just give you a little image. I'd be the client in therapy because they said, when you're in graduate school, it's really good to be a client, so you know how it all works. So, there's when you're sitting with someone and someone begins to talk about something and feeling starts to emerge, right? Starts to come up. And it's a bit unclear or not yet formed or known. And she would go like this. She would say, she sat really quietly and she'd say, "And can you sense how that is inside?" And that's what she did. And what she did was she did that nonverbal gesture, but she allowed a space. And in that space, it allowed me to kind of hear something deeper inside. And then somehow an image often came, and I thought, wow, here I'm studying expressive therapy. This thing is focusing. Somehow they just seem to go together. So I have spent the last, 40 years combining focusing with the expressive arts. And so I developed Eugene Genlin, who's the kind of developer of focusing. He says he didn't actually create it, he discovered it, because it's a natural human experience, which I'm going to talk about. So those are his books, Focusing-Oriented Psychotherapy, and then I integrated his work with the expressive arts. And so the first book I did was on Focusing-Oriented Art Therapy, even though I'm also an expressive therapist, but I felt like it's enough to talk about focusing with art, let alone focusing with music therapy or dance therapy or psychodrama. So I was like, someone else needs to write that. And then the mindfulness is an edited book. And one of the things perhaps you'll see today is I feel like focusing is a mindfulness-oriented practice. And so as we go through it, it'll become clearer why. And there's many focusing teachers in the world, and people emphasize different things. But for me, the kind of mindful awareness is a really key fundamental part. Okay? Okay. So before I go into the history and the background of focusing, I wanted to go over what I call the foundational principles. And they come both from Eugene Genlin and then how I've adapted them. So the first one is called presence. I love the introductions here because it's really about coming into presence, beginning with a little sitting and then introducing ourselves. And it really helps us all get here. So with psychotherapy, it's the presence. It's like, am I here? Am I willing to be here and listen to you? Am I aware of how I can notice what is in my stuff that I'm carrying and how to put it aside for that time so I can be present? How do I manage it? Because we all have stuff, and right? So, but I like Gene Genlin always taught, he has this quote where he said, there's always a person in there, right? So everyone we work with, he says, there's always a person. And I worked in traditional mental health in settings where, people get talked about, labeled, diagnosed, reduced to a symptom versus the whole person. And so he says, that's who we're working with. And that's who we're trying to connect with. And I just love that. So I love that as the beginning. And then he also says that safety comes first. And I love that too, that really it's about creating safety. And safety begins, with our presence and then the relationship, right? And I love that he didn't say focusing comes first. He actually didn't even say that focusing comes second. He said that actually listening comes second. And I love that too, because we really have to hear what our clients are bringing to us in order to do any kind of an intervention so that it really matches them. So then listening is a key part of focusing, and I think of it as like the right hand and the left hand, that they go together. So how many of you actually know focusing or something about focusing? Okay, yeah. Good somatic Sonoma County. I moved from Boston here. I was in Boston for 30 years, and I'm originally from New York. So it's definitely a different culture, and my experience is it's so much more common to like have an embodied sense. So
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Could you say again about why safety comes first?
Because
Or what is meant by what kind of safety?
just for the client to feel, the client to feel comfortable, to feel that they're going to not be harmed, that emotionally people are usually very vulnerable or fragile, and we want to create a space where they can kind of feel like, it's okay for me to share or talk about or not talk about something with you. Because it's hard to get anywhere if we don't start from a foundation of safety. Yeah, thanks for, so feel free to ask at any moment. And clinical sensitivity. So, as it was mentioned, I worked in, with severe mental health. I worked in psychiatric hospitals. I worked in day treatment more in the early part of my career. And, with mindfulness and with focusing, a lot of times when people teach, it's like what we say is close your eyes, right? But there's many clients that it's not safe to close your eyes in the beginning. Like they especially clients with severe mental illness or people with trauma, that there's a way, like, I need to know that I'm safe here first. And so I like to talk, so we always have to be clinically sensitive to adapt focusing, expressive arts, whatever we do, to each person that we work with, right? And so I like to say that because even here, I think it's important for people, for all of you to know that, when we do the experiential, if we're going to do a little focusing, if you don't want to do it, you don't need to. And if you want to keep your eyes open, that's also fine, or a soft focus. And I think that's really important with the clients that we work with so that they really feel that embodied sense of safety and groundedness. So I always want to make sure that clients can feel grounded, that they can look at you, that they can know that, here I am, here you are, here's my feet on the ground, before going inside to this inner experience, because we often don't know what's in there. Like surprising things can come up. And so we need to know that people can ground themselves. So there's like steps along the way to always make it safer. And then a key aspect is the focusing attitude, which it says explain later. Stay tuned. Okay. So what is focusing? So focusing is essentially, it's a process of bringing mindful awareness with a friendly or welcoming attitude towards our inner experience. And that's the key part, this friendly or welcoming attitude, because it's that friendly curiosity. And whether it's happiness, pain, fear, excitement, whatever it is, because we're all walking around all the time with experience, right? I mean, I was aware coming here today that, some people might be in a sensitive place who knew Mira, right? And so I was aware of, so it's funny kind of preparing. It's like, oh, I'm going to walk in and not be, So I knew that I didn't personally know her, but I know that some people do. And so there might be feelings in there, especially you had a morning session. So sometimes we have things and then we move on to the next thing, but it's not like it's not there. And so anyway, so there's that. And then there's also, when Sonoma County, it's so beautiful here, when you just see the breadth of the mountains, or when the grass turns green because we have so much rain, right? That too is our inner experience. And so it's bringing our awareness in a friendly way to that too. Okay, and then it's also accessing your inner wisdom.
And did you intentionally have inner twice?
Oh, did I? Inner. I like that. Yes. Towards our inner, yes. Keep going. That was good, because I kept saying to myself, spell check. And I don't think I did, but it wouldn't catch it. It wouldn't get, right. Yeah.
So are you assuming that everyone has an inner wisdom?
That is really a good question. Let's see. I don't know, I'm going to contemplate that as the talk goes on.
I didn't think there was an answer to
Okay, thank you. All right, but it's a wonderful question. Okay, so I want to share a little bit about the background of focusing. So focusing was developed by Eugene Gendlin during the 1960s. And I think it's really important to think back to the 1960s, not just that it was like a countercultural movement, but think of psychotherapy before 1960, right? Because it was mostly a psychoanalytic orientation. And so, today we have so many kinds of therapies, but it's important to think back to the impact of this. So Eugene Gendlin was at the University of Chicago and Carl Rogers was also teaching there during the same time. Eugene Gendlin was a philosophy doctoral student, and Carl Rogers was beginning his counseling center and teaching about client-centered, person-centered therapy. And Gene Gendlin was interested in how we have, he was a philosopher, so like our experiencing, right, our beingness, and how when we are experiencing being, that there's this inner experience, but when we go to talk about it, it's already sort of changed or different or like a little bit removed, not as direct. And he was interested, how do you symbolize this immediate experience? How do you do that? And so somebody said, there's Carl Rogers is at the counseling center, and he's doing something similar, but in therapy. And so Gene went over, we call him Gene, those of us who train with Gene. He went over to the counseling center, and he was kind of looking around at these brochures about what Carl was doing. And then he met Carl Rogers, and they connected, and then actually Gene became a student of Carl Rogers. And then they did this very big research project. And this is so interesting. They wanted to study these 3 questions. Why doesn't psychotherapy succeed more often? So we're still asking that question, right? Now it's like everything has to be evidence-based. It's the big buzzword. And why does it often fail to make a difference in people's lives? So I think, it's really evolved, and there's many more. You can see the effectiveness of a lot of therapies. But back then, this is the 60s. And when it does succeed, what is it that those patients and therapists do? And that's a really good question, because so much is always asking what isn't right or what's wrong, but actually what's happening. So they were actually the first psychologists to do audio tape of sessions and to actually then transcribe the content of those sessions. And so what they did was actual research where they had variables about what would demonstrate when people changed, what would show when people got better. And they used both what the client said about themselves, their self-report, what the therapist said, and then a significant other. And they analyzed it in terms of looking at those clients who talked about their early childhood experience, right? And that would be a more psychoanalytic orientation. Those people who talked about the client-therapist relationship, and that would be a much more, client-centered. And then there was another batch. And anyway, they correlated it up with the change, and they found that it made no difference what theoretical approach the therapist used. What actually they noticed was that they could hear it was what the client did. The client spoke in a certain way, and there were clients who naturally referenced their inner experience, and that they could check it inside to what felt right. So it would go something like this, the client comes in and they're talking and they're saying, yesterday when I went to the supermarket, I was walking down the aisle and suddenly I saw this person and I thought it was my sister. And I had this feeling of panic inside. And then they paused and they're like, no, it wasn't really panic. It was actually, I felt terrified. I felt terrified and anxious. That's it, terrified and anxious. So see, they were able to recognize it and be in touch with themselves. So another interesting thing is that Gendlin and Rogers were able to predict by the second therapy session, just by listening to how the client talked, which ones would get better and which ones wouldn't. And so this is, I think, the brilliant thing is that Jenlin said, well, if some people do this naturally, can't we teach them to do this process, this way of being and listening? And so that's how he developed focusing. And so, because we only have an hour and a half, he developed a method to teach people how to do it. But over time, because that was the 60s and it's now 2016, there's many ways of teaching focusing. And so some people like the original way and some people don't or whatever. So today what I want to do is give you a little of the essence of what it is. Okay, so is that all clear? Okay, all right. All right, yeah, so that's that. Okay, so the core thing that he found was what people were accessing inside was what he termed the felt sense. And so a felt sense, it's kind of like what I was saying, it can be about anything, both difficult issues and feelings as well as pleasant and positive ones. And I think the pleasant and positive ones is also really important as therapists because so many times we're oriented to, how does that feel? And oh, it's sad and oh. And then, something good comes and we and because the client will gloss over it too, right? Many times they oh, this good thing happened, but let me tell you what really, this horrible thing that happened. I always say, well, wait. wait. I say, wait, let's take a moment and let's check, hear how the good thing, what happened that was good. And so it's important to do that. So anyway, it's also about good feelings, and it's the bodily experience from the inside of an issue, a situation, or an experience. And I like what, I like this quote a lot, that a felt sense is not a mental experience, but a physical one. Physical, a bodily experience of a situation, a person, or event. And this is, I love this phrase, an internal aura that encompasses everything you feel and know about a given situation at a given time, encompasses it and communicates it to you all at once rather than detail by detail. Right? So we're actually going to do a little experience, but right, it's kind of when you have that sense in your body, it's all at once. It's like a musical piece, right? When you hear a musical piece, you kind of get the whole thing rather than, I guess really great musicians hear the note by note by note, but your experience is how does it feel together? And that's really what the felt sense is. Okay? So let's go to the next one. So here's the experiential part. Okay, so if you would like to try it, what I'd like to do is just guide you in a little bit of sitting and checking in with your own felt sense in this present moment. So if you want to try it out, you can do it, and if not, you can just listen along and just enjoy the nice quiet. But maybe you want to stretch first, just even sitting, because you sit for a long time, or even if you want to stand and stretch, because I know you've been sitting for a long time, right? And you could just shake it out a little bit, and your legs. And also your breath. Take a nice breath in, and let it go. And breathe in again, and let it go. And this time raise your arms, your shoulders, Well, your arms or shoulders, and then drop them. And then just shrug them. Because it is a lot when you're sitting, right? Yeah. And focusing is a body thing, so a lot of times it helps too. So, okay. And then find a comfortable way of sitting. And so just finding a way to sit comfortably in the chair. And then just begin by noticing your breath as it comes in your body and moves out of your body. And feeling the support of the chair that you're sitting on, your feet on the floor supported by the earth. And your connection to the sky and the heavens. And then as you breathe, just gently following your breath down inside to your body. And just noticing how it is on the inside in this moment. It might be jumpy, or it might be heavy, or it might be warm, it might be buzzy, it might be calm. So just noticing. And just seeing if you can be curious and friendly to however it is inside. And then you can see if there's a word or a phrase, an image, a gesture, or a sound that matches that inner felt sense. A word, a phrase, an image, a gesture, or a sound that matches that inner felt sense. And you can check it against your body for a sense of rightness. If it's not right, just let it go and invite a new word or phrase, image, gesture, or sound to come. And notice if you get a word, phrase, image, gesture, or sound, notice what happens when it matches or when you say it back to yourself. Notice how it feels in the body if it matches. And if it doesn't match, that's okay. Focusing takes a lot of practice. So just take another 5 seconds or so. And whenever you're ready, you can just bring your awareness back to being in the room and gently stretch. And if your eyes are closed, you can open them. And then what helps is to actually share it if that feels comfortable. If you don't want to share and someone wants to share with you, just say you don't, you just rather keep to yourself. But we'll take about 2 minutes each way. And here's the thing, you can just share if you feel okay about it. This is what I noticed in my body. This is what I noticed happened, and this is the word or phrase or image or gesture or sound that came. And if you noticed if it matched, if you noticed anything happen, you can share about that. Okay? So you want to share? Okay? Okay. So just pair up with someone near you, and if you don't want to, then that's okay. And I'm going to ring the bell when it's 2 minutes. Okay. So it helps in teaching focusing to teach the concepts of what this focusing process is and the felt sense. If a couple of people would want to share, this is what happened, this is what I noticed in my body, or this is the word, phrase, image, gesture, or sound. So I know sometimes people feel funny talking in a big group, but
We're therapists.
we're therapists, and it's a friendly place. So does anybody want to share? Yes? Okay. Oh, the microphone.
Well, I have a question because we did the exercise, and then Patrick and I sort of just started talking, as we usually do. And what I noticed was, it was a separate conversation, but I knew exactly how I felt, like, quickly.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so that was interesting.
Yeah.
Is that-
So it surprised you that you knew so quickly?
I think it was probably because after this exercise, I was sort of tuned into, finding my feelings. Or
Right.
Does
You
that
sort of
make
had a
sense?
warm up through the whole talk. It was
Yeah.
kind of taking you there, like walking
Yeah.
you towards a place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I was in kind of like searching for the word, right? I had
Okay.
this idea that I was going to get this information with a word.
Right.
But what was coming was an image.
Right.
So when I welcomed that image, then the word came quickly, then a lived experience came, and then I felt like there was more space or room around my inner experience. So I still would have had to do more to kind of follow that.
Right.
The curiosity and the welcoming of what was is what opened the door.
Right,
So-
right. Beautiful. So let me slow it down. So did you notice before you were looking for the word, right? Because sometimes that's our mind and we're in the habit of, right? It's kind of what we're used to. But what did you know? Did you notice anything in the body before looking for the word or the image?
Energetically, that's where I just feel a sense of either tight or loose.
Okay, so
And
where? Like up,
It was moving all over. And
all over the body.
And the word chaotic kind of wanted to come up, but that didn't match.
Right.
But this image then was
Right.
coming, and I could see the movement, and then it was like, it was like a big city with lots of cars moving in all different directions, and it was like congestion.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
See,
And then I went,
see how that
yeah.
connected, right? Everyone, the whole room went like, whoa, like, because we all got it, right? So, right. So the thing is, the reason why I slowed it down, because to really hear what's going on in the body, we slow it down, right? And also to teach you the felt sense. The felt sense is always the somatic body sense, right? So that for you, it was like all around, right? This kind of thing, it was like all around, going around the body. And then it's sort of like, almost the word chaotic came, but then it wasn't really chaotic. It was, but then the image. So what happens, just to explain it, so the felt sense, to slow it down and learn each part, is the body. It's just the body. And then generally he called it a handle or a symbol, which is a word, a phrase, image, gesture, or sound that matches it. And then it's interesting how it's specific, right? Because the word really wasn't it, even though you kind of wanted it. But then the image came naturally, because our bodies, it's an organic, lived experience organism. And if we give it time and space, it will come, right? So, but then when you got the image, right, and it matched, then like something else opened up. So we actually in focusing talk about that the felt sense opens, right? So I don't want to get too ahead because people get attached to it opening, but but it's the being. So the key parts are bringing that friendly curiosity to the body sense, because that, it goes back to the safety too. The body likes that, right? It likes that attitude. Most of us have that critic inside that's like always judging, critical, whatever, and then the body doesn't really want to talk to us, right? But, the way we are with our clients of being so warm and friendly and all of that, then when we bring that to ourselves, the body talks. So in learning focusing, we first learn it inside ourselves, because you can really start to understand it. And then we learn how to help the client navigate it inside, right? So, yeah. Did you want? Sure, of course.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
I felt calm.
Yeah.
And my image was a peaceful lake.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking at it, and I had a thought, which was
Okay.
it's a problem when you get a thought.
Okay.
But it was, I doubt it's that
I doubt it.
peaceful.
Okay.
And so I
doubt
spent
it.
the rest of the time looking for, where are the bubbles, there's probably some whirlpools in there.
Right, but let's see. Okay, so that's great. So you said you first, no, it was calm. So where did you feel that in your body? Core. Okay, core. So see, that's the felt sense. So felt sense, it's just that. That's the felt sense. And then the symbol, you got an image, was the lake, right? So that's the symbol that matches it. But then what happened is we call it, and Jean Genlin called it the inner critic. Am I doing that? Am I being noisy?
No, I think it's
Oh, okay.
the other mic.
Is it me? My critic just got activated. Okay. So when the critic gets activated, we have the inner critic, and one of the things in focusing actually is learning how to notice and recognize the critic, because it also gets in the way of focusing. Okay? So anyway, I think you get the general sense since I said we only have an hour and a half. Okay? And so anybody else have a question from the exercise? Yeah?
Yeah, does the inner critic have a felt sense?
Yes. What, contraction? Right. Oh, yeah. So that's how it feels, right? So that's an interesting question because it's like, is it the felt sense of the inner critic or how the inner critic, our felt sense of the inner critic? Right? But so what you're saying is when the inner critic is activated, it's contracted, right? Yeah. So Jean talks about how, yeah, so learning how to work with the critic. One of our colleagues who's a focusing teacher in the Bay Area writes a lot about the critic. It's interesting, like Jean would talk about his approach to the inner critic is just to, wave it goodbye, like, hey, take a seat out there, right? Actually, the first one of the times I heard Jean give a talk, and when he was talking about the inner critic, and he said, have you ever noticed that the critic has nothing new to say? When he said that, it went straight through me. It was just like it pierced my inner critic. It was like, okay, you're covered now. You're like, I don't know. And so it helps me because it really doesn't have anything new to say. So it helps me become aware of it. And that's also where mindfulness is really helpful because you can become aware of it. And then there's strategies for setting it aside, which actually I'm going to show you something else that is a setting aside. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think it's time to go on. Okay. So, many people, like probably when John learned focusing, right? You didn't learn expressive arts with it. Most of the focusing people really did it in this verbal, focusing inward way. But as I said, because I'm, into, art therapists, expressive arts, it seemed so natural that when that image came to just make the image. Right? And so, where did you go? No, you're, oh, there you are, yeah. So, you could have just made something from that beautiful lake, right? That's for me is the felt sense, I call it the doorway to the expressive arts. That it's very natural to go from the symbol, if it's a word or phrase can become a poem or creative writing, right? An image can become visual art expression, like that so clear could become a painting or something, a collage even. The gesture, sometimes people get a gesture, it's like this, or it's like this, right? And then this, if you do dance movement therapy, you could have the person embody it and kind of then, move with it. Like, so what is that like? Exaggerate it, and it could become a dance exploration. And then the sound, sometimes people get it's like, right? Just thought I'd wake you up. And then it could go into more expressive arts, sound, or music. You can use an instrument to express it. So it's really helpful for people who are interested in exploring the creative parts, or for people who are less verbal, too, who are open to that. Okay, so next one. So I thought I'd share with you an example. This was actually a student of mine, and I was teaching graduate school in a class on focusing-oriented expressive arts. So that's what I named the approach of integrating Jenlin's focusing with expressive arts. So I did what I just did with you, right? It was in a class, actually. So I led the class in focusing, and then the person got an image, and then she drew this. So this was a woman in her 30s who was in graduate school and got suddenly diagnosed with a rare illness. And it was a very chronic, life-threatening type of illness, autoimmune kind of thing, that she actually had to go on chemotherapy, different infusions and things like that. Her concentration, her brain got affected. She couldn't concentrate very much. She had to stop working. Her life got really compromised, and it was really hard. Fortunately, she was taking this class. So what was really nice is because she wrote a paper about it, and she gave me permission to share her art and her writing, because she really, sometimes with clients it's hard to get exactly the processing of it, And so here's what she said about this drawing. She said, before I began using focusing with art, I thought of my pain and anger with hatred. The illness is symbolized as a creature with black claws inside the human figure in red. So this, right, creature as an illness, because that's often with people who, have an illness. It's like something attacks your body, it invades it, and that's how often people feel. And the creature is clawing and scratching inside my body, leaving bloody red scratch marks. Which of those? So you can feel the rawness and the pain, right? So then we were working with the focusing attitude. So sometimes I just help people. So imagine what it would be like to be friendly to that. How would it feel if you were a little bit more friendly to this, right? So in expressive arts, or just in therapy, it's actually really helpful sometimes to imagine what it would be like, because it actually helps people find that experience. So do you know how to do this? Oh, there you go. So she focused again, this time imagining what it would like to bring this focusing attitude more to the illness. And here's what she said. She said, when I brought the attitude of being friendly to the illness, I began to see the creature as trapped inside my body, and that it was scared and confused. It wasn't evil, and it meant no harm. It was innocent and trying to get free. The image that came was of a blue human figure surrounded by the yellow light. And here's what she said. Now it was cradling the same creature, now buried and sleeping softly in its arms.